Welcome back. Now, there's Azoria Capital filing a lawsuit today against Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell, alleging that the central bank is violating law. The suit in part says this: Azoria believes the Federal Reserve is violating federal transparency law, and we are asking a federal judge to immediately block next week's Federal Reserve meeting from happening behind closed doors. Azoria is demanding the court order that the Fed to keep the meeting open as the company sounds the alarm on recent policy decisions, saying Azoria is deeply concerned that the FOMC under Chairman Powell is maintaining high interest rates to undermine President Donald J. Trump and his economic agenda. Joining me now is the CEO himself, Azoria CEO Fishback. James, thanks very much for being here. So you think this is all political?
I do, Maria. Good morning. The truth of the matter is that in a 4-year low under President Trump's leadership, 5 consecutive better than expected, lower than expected inflation readings, and the Federal Reserve refuses to lower rates from a 20-year high. That is a life-altering decision that affects Americans all over the country. They can't get a mortgage, they can't get a home, they can't start or grow their family. Azoria is now suing Jerome Powell in federal court this morning to demand that next week's meeting be open to public observation, as federal transparency law requires.
Well, I mean, they always had closed doors. So this meeting next week is no different than any other meetings, though.
Well, the fact of the matter is the fact that they've always from breaking the law. There's a couple Supreme Court precedents that have moved in our favor, specifically the overturning of the Chevron doctrine. But I got to tell you the truth, Maria. Americans are frustrated. They do not understand why Jerome Powell is being too late. They don't understand that despite inflation being at a 4-year low, that the Federal Reserve is refusing to lower rates. And so the public, Azoria, the president of the United States, can't even know why the Federal Reserve is not acting in accordance with the data. And so the only thing that can be done here is for a federal judge to step in, to issue a temporary restraining order against Jerome Powell, and to block him from having next week's meeting happen behind closed doors. That's what we're demanding the court do.
You know, it's just so many here. It's not just, and this is a big one that you just mentioned, that a mortgage is out of reach for so many people, but it's also the impact on the cost of capital for the government. I mean, you know, President Trump has been talking about this $36+ trillion in debt that the U.S. faces. He's been talking about his goal to balance the budget at some point. And how do you do that when we're actually spending more money just on the interest to carry that debt than we do on defense spending? So do you think that Chairman Powell should be looking at that and working that into his mandate? I mean, I know that the mandate of the Fed is just unemployment and inflation, but isn't the cost of debt part of the growth of the economy? Because if it's costing us so much money to carry this debt, it is impacting growth.
That is exactly right. And that's what needs to be model, Maria, that Jerome Powell seems to be neglecting, is that when high interest rates actually stifle economic growth, hurt home buying, for the government to deliver the balanced budget that we all know that President Trump can. The president has spoken about this. For every point that interest rates are above natural, it's costing taxpayers $315 billion a year. That is $3 trillion over the next decade. That is $31,000 American tax-paying household over the next decade, because Jerome Powell is not doing the right thing and looking at the data and lowering rates accordingly. Azoria runs an anti-DEI ETF. It's called SPXM. And what we see in the marketplace is that investors from all over the world cannot allocate capital properly if they don't know what the Federal Reserve is going to do next. The American public, businesses, and investors deserve to know what the Federal Reserve's deliberations are at any given point in time. That's why we're suing Jerome Powell in federal court this morning. I'm confident, Maria, the court will side with our arguments, but I got to tell you the truth. We are prepared to immediately appeal any decision, and if necessary, ask the Supreme Court to intervene before next Tuesday's meeting. Jerome Powell has to come out of the shadows. He cannot meet in secret. President Trump was right when he said in 2017 that the government needs to be open, honest, and accountable to the American people. And Azoria is standing up to President Trump's aim on that point.
And of course, he's visiting the Federal Reserve this afternoon, marking the first official presidential visit to the central bank in nearly 2 decades. The pressure on Powell to cut rates as the president joins other administration officials who requested a site tour. As scrutiny grows over the central bank's renovation costs, $2.5 billion. renovation. So we'll see what President Trump is a builder himself and a real estate titan before he went to Washington. You mentioned this anti-DEI ETF. What kind of reception are you getting from that ETF, James? And is this a broad variety of industries and companies in that ETF that are, not doing DEI? How do you come up with this ETF?
Well, we came up with it very simply, Maria. We start with the S&P 500 index universe, all 500 companies, and a company that has an explicit DEI hiring quota. So when Nike comes out and mandates that 35% of their U.S. corporate workforce must be ethnically diverse, we kick them out because ethnic diversity has absolutely nothing to do with selling a pair of running shoes at a profit. And it turns out, Maria, that the research we've done at Azoria has found that when you kick out these 38 companies, that you actually have a potential to outperform the S&P 500 itself, because these 38 have underperformed by nearly 20 points over the past 2 years. It's called SPXM.
Really interesting. But at the same time, the launch of a Tesla ETF, right?
We are. We did that 2 weeks ago because we're uncertain what he was doing with this America Party. I got to tell you the truth, though. It's been 18 days since he's even mentioned the America Party publicly. I thought it was a terrible, ridiculous stunt. The president seemed to agree as well that would likely give Hakeem Jeffries and AOC control of the House and Congress once again.
Wow.
I'm glad to see that Elon is no longer talking about that stunt anymore. If that continues, if he continues to focus on building Tesla to be the $5 trillion company it can be, we will relaunch that ETF soon.
All right, James, we're watching you for being here this morning.
Thanks, Maria. God bless.
James Fishback joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.